Understanding your injury, knowing how to move on, and really understanding the difference between pain and progress is something which is so difficult. In this video, I'm going to help you understand that journey and that decision by talking to you about my experiences. It's something we all want to avoid, and it's something which really can affect us, not just physically obviously, but also mentally, psychologically. Experiencing an injury is a really demanding process. And for many of us who are just getting into sport or perhaps haven't done a particular type of sport which increases the chance of injury, this will be a scary process. And actually, you won't be sure whether you're injured, whether you're repairing, whether you're perhaps going too hard or not going hard enough. And there are a lot of people who won't be brave enough to tell you about their journey. I have experienced injuries over my sporting career. I use that word career quite lightly. I'm not a professional, I'm nowhere near a professional, but I have trained an awful lot and across a variety of different sports. Most of my time was spent within football, basketball, and athletics. And actually, during athletics, I tried to do an incredibly difficult sport, the event, what's called the decathlon. Now, interestingly, most people don't ever complete a decathlon, and I wondered why at the start of this journey. And actually, in the conclusion, I found out why. I tore my Achilles. I actually had just 1 millimeter left on the bone, and therefore I was close to a full rupture, and unfortunately, the worst kind, because you cannot reattach that tendon to the bone. Up to this point, I'd experienced many different kinds of injuries, most of them muscular. I had experienced some kind of tendon damage and ligament issues, particularly around the knee from long jumping, but this was my first major injury. Interestingly, most people talk about an Achilles injury or a rupture, that they hear an explosion. It's really noticeable when it occurs. In my case, it wasn't. I was doing some plyometric work. One of my junior athletics coaching groups was just over there, about 60 meters away, watching me do some hurdle jumps. And I thought, doesn't feel quite right. Didn't think anything of it. Then for the next 4 hours, I went and coached on my feet. Different groups, traveling around different locations. Got home, had some dinner. Then I thought, right, gonna jump in the shower, took my socks off, and noticed my left Achilles, ankle, lower part of my calf was a deep ruby kind of black color. Deep down, I knew exactly what this was. However, I didn't want to admit it because we all know an Achilles tendon injury is a pretty devastating one. Depending on the level it occurs, it can really rule you out of doing any kind of sport for an extended period of time. If you catch it really early on, and it's just a bit of tendonitis, it can actually be recovered and overcome quite easily. Now, in my case, I didn't want to believe it, so I started scrubbing. I thought, somehow some of the coloring off my shoe, off my sock has gone onto my skin, and I scrubbed. And I ended up going up to my girlfriend, my now wife, and just saying, does this look like paint or something? Unfortunately, she was like, I think that's blood underneath your skin. I took a photo of it. This is back in 2013, so this is before real online consultations were a thing. Sent it to my mate and said, look, this has happened. I'm really worried. I know you can't make a judgment, but can you make a judgment? He told me, you need to get down to my clinic in the morning. So I traveled over to Loughborough, had some scans, and basically I had this 1 mil of my tendon attaching my entire Achilles tendon to my heel. This wasn't a mid-tendon tear, this was insertional heel tendon tear, and fortunately placed me in a boot. Fast forward 5 years and Achilles pain is part of my life. 5 years later, I'm able to run, but I will experience a lot of pain. I will often experience pain first in the morning if I get tight calves, but it's really important to understand that truthfully, my chances of injuring and experiencing excruciating pain just via the rehab exercises is very low. If I made a full return to sport immediately, or attempts to, then your chance of re-injury and re-rupture is incredibly high with the Achilles tendon. But with my case, as long as I followed the rehab protocol, I wore an air boot for an awful long time, I was able to resume some kind of activities. And what's really interesting is that my performances weren't largely different between immediately before and immediately afterwards. It was just the amount of duration that I could perform those performances for. Now, in my case, I still experience some pain and it's definitely my weakest area, but following some protocols like the Alfredson's protocol is really effective to me. I do recommend that you always get a professional to come up with your protocol and what's the most effective protocol, and that should realistically be a physiotherapist or a consultant surgeon first and foremost, and then work with an S&C or a coach following that. That's the background story. To give you an understanding of moving further though, it's about understanding the difference between pain and tenderness and soreness and the associated effects. People have these feelings that a little niggle is the end of the world. That's not the case. A little niggle can actually be worked with, and when we're working at the highest performance, we'll very often find that we're actually just managing niggles, we're managing injuries all of the time. We might have tightness. That's nothing to worry about. Try not to panic. It's about being calm and controlled and thinking, okay, I'll do a little bit of icing, I'll do a bit of stretching, I might actually drop some of my intensity down for the next couple of days, but it's all manageable. When we look at treating issues as well, we have to understand that DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, will occur as a result of your rehab protocol, particularly if you've got this injury because you've got a weakness in there, and now you're training it specifically to recover. You're going to get some muscle soreness because it's working more than it ever has in the past. It's not necessarily just the injury. We have to be aware of the different sensations in that area so we can diagnose and understand whether we're really experiencing pain because the injury is getting worse or just because we're actively concentrating on repairing the tissues in that area. It's really, really important that we have an idea that how we're going to move from being injured to being healthy, what it takes to get there, and also, as soon as you get to recovered, don't stop. That's the thing we all do. We do all the hard work to make sure we recover, and then at the very last moment, we stop everything because we're recovered, right? And then we drop back to normality and don't do anything. We've been a creature of habit all this time and we get re-injured in that same area. That's always detrimental to performance and to psychology. Make sure that your rehab protocol is staged. It works nice and easily and progresses just like you are doing with your actual training for performance. You look at what exercises are the most effective. You get a second opinion perhaps. You make sure that what you are doing is planned and it is loaded and you stick to it. That is the most critical thing. Icing as well. You should ice 3 to 5 times a day, 20 minutes at a time, no direct skin contact with that ice pack. This is what effective icing is. Icing it once a week is not going to do anything, to be honest. It might just make you a little bit cold. But if you ice it properly, you'll find that ice is possibly the best medicine you can use for an area. Now, when it comes to using anti-inflammatories and painkillers, those kind of things, you must consult a health professional. But don't be scared about certain feelings and sensations in the area. Try to just work with them. Understand that it might feel really tender, but is tenderness pain? Or is tenderness just you dealing with the fact that you have an injury and it's uncomfortable, but you're going to work forwards? One of the notorious things is really rolling your glutes or your calves, and it is painful. And you think, oh, this is so painful, I can't possibly do it. This must be an injury, when in fact, actually, it's just you working on an incredibly tight area, and then fingers crossed, that's going to be beneficial in the long run. This really is a segment that I'm going to talk lots about because we all experience injury at some point or some time. I'm very fortunate that the majority of my athletes and runners pretty much don't get injured. They haven't felt injuries, and that I would largely put down to an effective strength and conditioning protocol. So we do an awful lot of strength and conditioning work, and if that strength and conditioning work drops off, we have a bout where we don't do it for a while, then I'd say we're vulnerable to injury at that point. So I always encourage it. If you have a specific injury you'd like me to talk about, then please drop it in the comments, send me a message, drop me an email, info@performancephysique.co.uk. I would love to help you with your running, with your training, with your nutrition, so get in touch. But for now, hit the subscribe button, click like, tell all your friends, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.